My name is James Saito. Since my early childhood in Brandon, Manitoba, I've been an avid lover of animals. Over the years, I've had the good fortune of having many wonderful pets of my own. My current occupation is as a film producer, but I'm also a volunteer at the Calgary Wildlife Rehabilitation Society. I decided some time ago that I wish to further my understanding of what wildlife must endure as our cities, highways, and civilization in general encroaches upon their habitats. About a year ago, I decided to step up my responsibility and document what life as a volunteer for the organization encompasses. The Society does its best to educate the public and help animals in distress. The Calgary Wildlife Rehabilitation Society is a not-for-profit organization and yet is still tragically underfunded. It's my intention to help them raise funds and awareness so that the small staff that put in very long hours might be compensated accordingly and equipment and supply levels may be maintained so that injured and orphaned animals continue to receive the utmost care for their recovery and release back into the wild. I was delighted to have an opportunity to use my skills and work with Shaw on the film that you're about to see.
My name is Andrea Hunt, and I'm the Executive Director at the Calgary Wildlife Rehabilitation Society. The Calgary Wildlife Rehabilitation Society is a nonprofit charitable organization whose mandate is to rehabilitate and injured and orphaned wildlife in Calgary and the surrounding area. I first started out as a volunteer actually. So I started as a volunteer in 2011 or 12. I can't remember exactly which year. And then in 2013 I was hired as the business administrator. And then last year I was promoted to the executive director position. My job is pretty much everything that doesn't have to do with animals. So when I tell people I work here, they're like, oh, it's so great, all the animals. Actually, my job is everything that doesn't have to do with animals. So I do payroll. I do all our donor relations. I make sure that I do all of our financial information and all our financial reports and whatnot. I do volunteer relations, so I coordinate site tours and the initial contact for all of our new volunteers. I also am the media liaison, so I make sure that the media knows when we have things that are interesting stories and coordinate with them for when they can come on site. I do, like I said, basically everything that doesn't have to do with animal care. And Jenna, we're both basically managers of the center. So I'm the executive director and she's the animal care operations manager. But in our organization, those two positions are on the same level. So we coordinate together and we make decisions together about what's going to happen for our facility. But she's in charge of all the animals. So she's in charge of the wildlife hospital and is in charge of like facility maintenance and construction. So she makes sure that all of our permits are in order and has the ultimate say on what's happening in terms of our protocols for animal care. She runs the hospital and oversees maintenance and construction. We're situated in the far northwest of Calgary, in the Spy Hill area. Which is interesting because there's not really that many wildlife rehabilitation organizations that are actually within cities. We're the only one within the city of Calgary. When people come out here, what they're going to find is a whole lot of outdoor enclosures, which of course is necessary for our rehabilitation of our animals. But we also have an administrative trailer and a clinic area where we do surgeries and triage and have basically an ICU for wildlife, where we keep our more critical patients who need more care and need to be kept warm and that sort of thing. We recently received an owlet that came in after it had fallen out of its nest and basically been impaled by a twig. Luckily, it didn't go through any of the bones, so it was basically a flesh wound, and so just healing it up, and then we just have to raise it until it's old enough to be out on its own.
This owlet was brought into us 3 or 4 days ago. He's about a month old, and he came to us because somebody had found him in a tree in Edworthy Park in Calgary. And so they had seen something strange with his wing and had assumed it was a broken wing. So they retrieved him and brought him to our hospital. He is too young to feed himself at this point. So normally when we get birds of prey, we provide them with food in their enclosure and they just eat it at their leisure. But because he's still a nestling, he should be fed, hand-fed or beak-fed by his parents in the nest. So we have to provide him with chopped up food 3 to 4 times daily, and they have huge appetites, so he eats quite a bit of food. So we're providing him with rodent meat, so we cut up some mice for him. We minimize the amount of bone and fur that's in that mouse meal that we give him. It takes a lot of energy for them to produce a pellet to cough up the bone and fur, so we like to reduce the amount of work that he has to do. So he's getting tongue fed, so we use tweezers to feed him. And he is a really great eater, so we don't have to do what we call force feeding, where we force their mouth open and put it in. He really happily takes those morsels from us.
Basically, what I love about my job is that every day is something different. Every day we receive new animals, and even though I am not the one taking care of them, I'm still here and part of that culture. So, you know, this morning, one of the staff members brought over one of the patients for me to see. And it's that sort of, you're not going to get that anywhere else. I love that I'm in the city, but it feels like I'm not in the city. I love that when I look out my window, I see dandelions and grasses, and sometimes we see moose, and sometimes we see coyotes, and we see all sorts of wildlife that lives here on its own, not just our patients, but there's actually wildlife that, like a flourishing ecosystem that surrounds us on our property anyway. So I love that about my job. I love the people here. The people here are amazing. Everybody here cares, and they don't just care about our patients, they care about each other. And I'm not sure that anyone should work somewhere where they're not cared for. So basically, it's like winning the job lottery. Certainly you don't make a lot of money, but when I go home at the end of the day, I feel like I have contributed. I've contributed to the welfare of animals. I've contributed to the lives of creatures, and that's really important to me. The feeling of contributing back to society, the feeling of offering something, and that it's meaningful. And I don't think anyone could argue that this is not meaningful work. We generally receive over 2,000 patients in a year. Obviously, it fluctuates year to year, depending on what animals, what their activity is, and what people find, basically. So it's really unpredictable. It's one of the cool things about this job, though, is like the unpredictability of it. You never know what's going to come in day to day. You never know what's going to be here tomorrow. So we definitely receive quite a lot, though. It tends to hover around 2,000 animals a year. Most of those animals are admitted in the spring and summer.
Okay, well, what we're doing today, James, is I'm going to have you help me feed 2 mule deer fawns that we have here at the center.
Okay, sign up for that.
They are extremely cute, so try and contain yourself, and we're going to feed them from a bottle. Right now they share a full bottle, so it's pretty straightforward, but we want to make sure that we keep ourselves clean so that we don't transmit any germs to those guys. It'll be fun.
And you were mentioning that they have diarrhea.
They do have diarrhea.
Then I would like to stress
It's pretty normal for these guys to have diarrhea at this time, especially they are newborn fawns, so they're just starting on their fawn diet. So right now it's pretty normal for their tummies to get a bit upset. So we shouldn't worry about it too much, but we'll avoid getting poop on ourselves and we'll clean up nicely.
So what are they doing here? Were they injured or abandoned? Or?
No, well, it's a really interesting story, actually. Is we got a call the other day from a man who was taking wildlife photographs near Bragg Creek, and he was taking pictures of a beautiful mule deer female who was standing in the river. And all of a sudden, she delivered these 2 fawns into the creek, and the fawns were washed downstream. And so, of course, he panics, and he runs downstream, grabs them, puts them on the shore, right on the bank in the sun, and sat there and waited to see what the mom would do. And she was quite far away at that time, and so she was just kind of standing around looking a little confused about what was happening. So he hid in the bushes for almost 5 hours and waited for her to come and claim her babies, and she just didn't. So during that day we were in contact with him, we talked with him, and then we finally said, okay, I think it's a bit late. She's probably really confused, probably a first-time mom, doesn't really understand what happened. Let's bring those babies in. And so they've been here for almost 48 hours, and so they're just 2 days old, and they're wonderful,
I'm
wonderful.
looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, well, lead the way.
All right, well, we're just going to get some milk prepared for them, and then we're actually going to take them outside to have a bit of a picnic. It's really good for them to be outside, to get used to nosing around in the grass. That's pretty normal behavior for them, but they're a bit small to be living outside right now. So we'll get them out there, have a little deer picnic.
Sounds wonderful.
Okay.
Blue's my color.
It is. I see you've got the full denim.
I've
Very
got the
nice.
autumn complexion.
And that just tucks through a hole in the side there. One goes through, and then you can just tie it in the back or the front, whatever you prefer, Paige. Now it's the deer roundup. Ah. It's a fun game for everyone. All right, she'll come to us, not to worry. Where are you going? Oh, princess. All right. Come on, little one. Oh, they get so tired so quick now. This is Brooke, and you can just stand with your hands on her, make sure she doesn't run away. And this is River, and they are twins. Oh, and they're both females. Hi. Oh, so we will, I'll pass you some milk, and you'll just do what I do. So I'll show you, just hang on to her. And so what you want to do is hold under their chin, open their mouth a little bit, and put the nipple in. Then you want to make sure they tip their head up. I know. All right, let's start with her. She's definitely more hungry these days. So just take the bottle, and it's okay if you get milk everywhere.
All right.
We'll just hold her head up and open it, her mouth a little bit, and pop that nipple in there, and make sure you're holding the bottle straight up and down. Yeah. And I'll hold her chin up. Because these guys are quite little, they would be reaching up. Make sure you're holding the bottle kind of all the way up. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. More like
That?
a hanging
Yeah,
nipple.
like it was a hanging nipple under the mom.
Oh, is that nice? Is that...
She'll hang her tongue out
Oh, my goodness.
so cutely.
So they're both healthy?
Mm-hmm.
So their prospects of surviving in the wild are good?
Oh, very, very good. Fawns, I don't want to say they're easy to raise because I don't want members of the public to think that it's something that they should do, but they do really well. And one of the nice things about fawns is that they're big enough that if we do need to give them IV fluids or we do need to perform treatments on them, everything is very identifiable on them. So really the only thing that we ever come up against with these guys is contagious or infectious diarrhea, which we can get a handle on pretty quick. But otherwise they do really well. Most deer need to stay in captivity for a year to a year and a half. What we do here is we raise them to a couple months old to make sure they're veterinarily sound, and then we'll transfer them to a different facility where they can have a lot more room to run around for the next year or so. With mammals that are this young, you just can't be hands-off with them because this is a natural part of their development to have that physical contact, the cleaning, the rubbing, the grooming. That is part of their development. So we don't want to deprive them of that. But then it's sort of an internal conflict for us because we don't want to be encouraging a lot of hands-on behavior with wildlife. So we can do this for a little while they're still really young and developing that tactile sense of touch, but once they get a little bit older, it'll be a lot more hands-off. Yeah, a lot of people in the public think, and I mean even my friends and family think that this is what I do all day is sit around and snuggle baby animals. And you know, the reality is that with most of the animals that are here, we're so hands-off with them, and it's just a lot of cleaning and answering the phone and emailing. There are special times like this when we're doing feedings that we make sure that these animals are having that hands-on mammal experience. But for the most part, I mean, this is as hands-on as it will ever get for these guys.
Not function as an organization without the help of our volunteers. They do so many jobs for us, help us in so many different ways. If we had to hire people to do all that work, we would never be financially feasible as an organization. So we appreciate all the work that they put in so much. We have, it depends on the day or the month, but we have at least 100 active volunteers just about at all times. And that the numbers sort of fluctuate depending on what's happening in people's lives and how much interest we have. But generally we have about 100 active volunteers all the time. Enthusiasm makes a good volunteer. People who care about what they're doing, they care about doing a good job, they care about doing an appropriate job, they care about the work that they're doing. Those are the people that you want as a volunteer. People who are hardworking and caring and enthusiastic, but who also understand what you're trying to do. So sometimes people are overly enthusiastic if they love wild animals. Like I said, we talked a little bit about snuggling and how it's not appropriate. And so we definitely want to make sure that our volunteers listen to the things that we tell them and take it in and make sure that they're in alignment with our mandate. But usually our best volunteers are the people who they care so much about what we do. They care about the wildlife that comes in, and they work every week or every month or however many times they can volunteer to make sure that we can achieve our mandate.
My name is Judy Brown, and I have been volunteering for the Calgary Wildlife Rehabilitation Society for about 10 years now. I chose this path because I'm interested in animals, and it's a way to make a difference in the community, even if it's a very small one sometimes. Duties here mostly at this point involve pickups from 24-hour vet hospitals. We encourage people to take injured and orphaned wildlife to 24-hour vet clinics, and the volunteers go to the vet clinics, pick them up and bring them up here, making sure we get them here safely. Volunteering here is very rewarding when you have picked up a very small animal and it looks helpless and hopeless, and lo and behold, a few months later, it's ready to be released.
So we're here from Calgary North. Excellent. Yeah, are they in good shape? They are. Excellent. Yes.
And you take it somewhere safe and you release it, and away it goes and back to nature, and that is the best feeling in the world.
So our baby skunks are in here. We have 3 little boys. Now, these 2 are a little bit older and this one's a bit younger, so these 2 are a little more apt to spray. This one is not. So I'm gonna grab this one. He's my little guy named Booger, and you can hold him. So what you wanna do with skunks, you wanna make sure you tuck their tail underneath and then just hold them with both hands so that their legs aren't dingling, like a little apple. Perfect. Ooh, pungent, potent potables. Not yet. Not yet. And we'll go on outside. So these guys are about 6 weeks old. This guy's about 4 weeks old. He has a sinus infection, so he's a little snuffly, but he'll be fine. These guys are on solids. You can tell already how kind of aggressive and defensive they are. They've really learned. Yeah, and a lot of stomping. This is their big aggressive behavior. And this guy hasn't quite figured that out yet. He's like, I just want to play, guys. This one is definitely the most, I think, the most aggressive one. These 2 are pretty good. And he just wants to play. He just wants to wrestle. He's still in baby mode and still on milk. These 2 are on solids. When you do get sprayed by these guys, it's pretty stinky, but it's not a huge volume of spray. Whereas a full-grown adult, that's a lot of stink.
So it'd be just like kind of like just a dab behind the ears.
Yeah, like a little spritz, a little drip. When these guys spray, you can usually see just one drop flying through the air, yellow, landing on you. Whereas with a full-grown adult skunk, it is a big atomized cloud of smelliness. And it's an oil-based product, so it's kind of greasy and sticks to hair, sticks to fabric, sticks to fur. So tomato juice is, I mean, it's a good cure-all for pets that are smelly. Something about the acid in the tomatoes actually helps dissolve oil-based potent smells. It's not so helpful for humans. We just find that soap and water, when we get sprayed, which is all the time, it comes off our clothes and off our skin really well.
Well, that's good to know. The only time I've ever even heard of that remedy for being sprayed by a skunk was on the Partridge Family.
The Partridge Family.
There's much that you can learn from 70s sitcoms.
This is very true. I think the first person who told me about the tomato soup was my mom as well. And when she was a child, her chocolate lab had been sprayed by a skunk, and that's what they used.
When I was growing up in Brandon, Manitoba,
Yeah.
there were skunks everywhere. And
Yeah.
actually,
Oh,
the
yeah.
smell of a skunk actually is very nostalgic
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, I could believe it. And these guys, there's something so nice about the smell of a baby skunk. It's got that sweetness of a baby, but that muskiness of an adult skunk. Really, for a lot of our staff here, skunk season just is the best season of all. And I think these guys are probably tied with squirrels for my favorite baby animals.
And again, is human contact at this point in your life?
Oh, they
Well,
don't
they're-
care
they
for
don't
us at all.
No?
They don't, as much as this one looks like it's a fan of you. But once they're off milk, they just have no interest in us whatsoever, which is great, actually. I will take that. I love those rehabs where you can have that hands-on, nurturing mothering time, and then you just say farewell. Well, we tend to get calls from people who live in farmland and on acreages, and I swear, every year I hear tons and tons of people say, well, we raised one when we were younger, or I had a skunk as a pet, or I have a friend who has a skunk as a pet. And they really are fantastic creatures, and you really can sort of get them used to you enough that they can be quite tame, but their natural behaviors are smelly. And it's normal for them to be digging a lot and catching live prey, and that's just not stuff that people can really fulfill for them in their homes. It is legal to keep these guys as pets in the United States. They do sell them descented, which means that they've surgically removed those anal glands. I think that's a bit of a bummer. I mean, they really are wonderful animals, and it's really great to have the opportunity to get to know a skunk. but they truly are wild animals. They have wild instincts. The closest thing to a pet that you would find that are like these, they're very much like ferrets. They have that similar smell, similar behavior, that kind of stuff. But ferrets are a domesticated animal, whereas these are definitely wild animals that when people keep them as pets, they take them from the wild and keep them in their homes, which is not really ever something we want to encourage. These guys will grow up and have a wonderful life as amazing animals. A lot of people don't appreciate them in their yards the way that they probably should. Because these are great rodent hunters. People who have mouse problems out in their sheds or under their decks, these guys are keeping them in check. And most of the time you find that people who have skunk problems are also people who have mouse problems, or people who don't clean out their bird feeders, so they're attracting a lot of mice. These are amazing little pest control creatures, but yes, they're smelly.
What's your idea for their release in a time frame and that sort of thing?
Well, these guys can go anywhere between 14 and 18 weeks. So, I mean, we're only looking at a few more weeks for these guys. And we have a couple of options with where we can release them. A lot of the time we release them on private property when people have acreages and they don't mind having them out there. They do a great job at controlling pests. Certainly people who have farms and stuff really like them. Right. So we always kind of send out some feelers to our volunteers who might have acreages or people who have farmland who want to have skunks out there. Alternately, we can transfer them to the same facility where we might send the fawns. They have a lot of property. They love skunks. They're not concerned about things getting sprayed out there, so we can transfer them there as well. So I'm not sure what we're going to do with these guys yet, but they'll be released within probably 6 to 8 weeks from now, and they'll be perfectly happy little skunks. And let me tell you, that rounding these guys up for release is the smelliest time of the year, because no matter how much they like us, they don't ever want to be put in a carrier and taken in the car.
I love animals. I've always been fascinated with all kinds of animals, you know, I believe in the circle of life, that you know, we can help animals along to be released out into the wild, and the ones that are more injured or suffering, then I believe that this organization helps those as well. My name is Nancy Whelan, and I've been a volunteer at CWRS for about 3 years. I started volunteering here shortly after my mother died, actually, and I found that I had time, and I had a desire to continue caregiving in a way. So I started volunteering here because I love animals, and I knew I couldn't work at something like the Calgary Humane Society because I'd end up taking all the animals home. So I ended up here because I knew that that couldn't happen, that I was here to give care to the animals, but I couldn't take them home. And the most rewarding part of the job for me is really seeing animals up close. I mean, where else would you have the opportunity to be a few feet away from a bald eagle, or to be up close to a great horned owl? So for me, the most rewarding part of the job is seeing the beauty of the animals and learning about them. My duties as a volunteer, mostly feeding and cleaning is what I do. So I do the occasional pickup, or I used to do that. I haven't done that for a while. But typically I work at another job 4 days a week, and so I try to come in on Fridays, and my shift really is supporting the great people here and whatever it is that they need done. So typically that is cleaning out cages and preparing food for animals. So we just try to put a bit of grass or some branches into the enclosure with the ducklings or the goslings. I don't know, just to make it feel a little more like the outdoors, I guess. So I just dumped a whole bunch out, so I'll put some back in. Yeah, my daughter this morning was like, "You're going dressed like that?" I said, "Well, we don't wear
Ball gown kind of situation.
Usually I show up and I believe that CWRS is an organization of people who care about animals deeply, and that their philosophy is to ensure the best quality of life for those animals and return them back into the wild so that everybody can enjoy them. We are all stewards of this world. We're stewards of our own lives, but we're also stewards of nature and the environment, and that we have a responsibility not just to look after ourselves, but to look after the environment. And what we do at CWRS is part of that. It's all part of the picture of being stewards of wildlife and the environment in our world.
Hey Jenna, how you doing?
Great. How are you doing, James?
Oh, I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm just here to check on Owlet and see how he's doing.
What I'd like to do today is have a little exam of the wound that he presented with. He's doing really great, but I just want to make sure it's scabbing up really nicely. He's still on antibiotics, so I want to make sure that that's healing okay. And if you want to help me out, that'd be great.
Okay, I'd be delighted to.
Oh, excellent. James, this is Emily. She's one of our
Hello,
techs
Emily.
here. And Owlet, your friend. So what we're gonna do is, if you want to just kind of sit him calmly in this little nest and see if he'll just kind of sit there without flopping around. You'll see how angry he is. He's now able to stand up on his own.
And he has color and isn't quite so fluffy.
Exactly, and his little horns are coming in right here, so he's looking a little bigger. You can see him panting right now. That's a normal stress response for great horned owls. A lot of people think that it's because they're hot. It is a very hot day, but they don't actually thermoregulate that way. So this is a stress response, and that's completely normal. He is turning into a little aggressive monster, and he has a healthy fear of humans. So that's what we like to see. We don't want him to be too stressed out, but this is a perfect and appropriate reaction. So we're looking at probably another week or two until we can get him out with one of our foster parents here. So he'll be able to perch very well, and he'll readily accept food from our foster owls. He's doing really well. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have a look at that wound that he has on his wing. And as you might remember, we talked about last time that he was impaled on a pine stick as he fell out of his nest. So he has a small wound. He's still on antibiotics. That will probably finish up here pretty quick. We'll just make sure that that wound is doing well and looking clean. So because he's still a juvenile, his eyes are still a bit cloudy, so his vision's not great. It will develop as he gets a bit older. So any kind of movement near him is pretty startling for him. And also, I don't think, as much as I would like to think that he has some trust in what I'm doing, he does not. We'll get him lying on his back, and we'll have a look at his, moves. So yeah, that's perfect. So we'll just cover up his face so he doesn't have to look at us while we do this. So we'll extend his wings and have a look to see what's happening here. So you can see here that his flight feathers are coming in. And what's really cool about these is when they're developing, the shaft of the feather is full of blood. So they're called blood feathers. So you see all that dark blood in there. And that blood is supplied directly from the periosteum of the bone. So these guys are attached right into the bone, and then as soon as they're developed, they'll seal off the ends, and then the blood will dissipate, and those will be healthy, perfectly great feathers. I'm not seeing any wounds, which is really good. So I'm not seeing any signs of scabbing, which is great. I know you're very cranky. Excellent. So it looks like all the feathers are developing properly. Each one of these flight feathers is vital to his ability to move around and hunt as he gets older. So we're glad to see all of those. And then we'll pop him back up. Oh, and then we'll just let him hang out and cool his jets.
One of the duties I also have is, as an educator, presenting the important things about wildlife in Calgary, what happens to wildlife, what things look like, because so many people don't get to see nature up close anymore.
You went to the Assiniboine Zoo to live. Put it in squares, and then you take it like this. Then something back. Other way. It's either one way or the other. So. There. Can you pull the edges out, the ends out there? There we go. There's one more there. How are you doing? Okay. I should be good at this by now, but I'm not. So you're going to fold all these into the middle.
They see a goosefoot and they have no idea that this comes off a living animal. What is this? And they're fascinated. And the wings, telling them about the differences in the feathers. The goose wing is much harder. It makes sound when it goes through the air. Whereas an owl wing, the feathers are different. They're softer, and that helps an owl fly silently. And that's important to the owl because if it's flying silently, it can sneak up on a mouse much easier than if it's making a big racket.
And then we'll just go on into the exam room.
So, Gina, what do we have here?
So here we have a red-tailed hawk who was admitted to our hospital yesterday. We don't have much history on him, and we can't really find, he's very lethargic, but we don't really have a reason for admittance. So we don't know if he was hit by a car, if he flew into a window, if he's been poisoned. We don't have any of that information. From what I can see, he's looking really dehydrated, poor body condition, quite thin, but physically intact, so no fractures or anything of that concern right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a blood draw on this guy, and we're going to do a little bit of blood analysis on him and see if there's any hints as to what's happening with him on that. So what Emily's going to do is going to lie him down on his back here, and I'm going to look at his veins on his wings and his legs and see if I can find a good site for taking blood. So I'm just going to have a look. So because these guys have such scaly feet, it's hard to get a needle in any of the skin. The vein runs along here. So I'm just going to pluck a little bit here and see if I can find a vein there, which he's not going to love, but these are just little downy feathers, so they're not embedded very deeply.
How much, what would the volume of blood?
Well, for this guy, we usually say that the blood volume for these guys is about 3% of their body weight. I don't need a whole lot, so I'm just going to take this much. And then I'm just going to apply some pressure to that site so he doesn't bleed or bruise. So if you wouldn't mind, Emily, just squeezing him around there and just make sure he doesn't bleed all over the place. And so what I will do, and then I'll just put this blood into this vial.
The facility here is able to analyze the blood? Or
Yeah, so we have a very limited blood analysis selection of things that we can do here. We don't have a blood chemistry analyzer. I would like one, but we'll get to that in time. We can send the blood out to local laboratories here, and we do some really basic analysis here.
Meanwhile, in the raptor enclosure, Owlet is recovering nicely. He is healthy, eating well, and socializing with the Society's training owls Oberon, Ophelia, and another rescued owlet. At first glance, it's hard to tell who is who as the babies have grown considerably. Both owlets' prospects for an early release are looking good, and they're trying to fly in the space provided. So today, we're at Bowness Park in Calgary to release some hawks. Andrea, tell us a bit about these birds, how they came to the society, and their treatment.
Okay, well these 4 juvenile Swainson's hawks came to us presenting with head trauma. So they're all separate cases, but they did come from this area in Bowness, and they had sustained some kind of head trauma, which means that they ran into a window or something like that. They spent some time in our facility and have recovered nicely, so now we're putting them back where they came from, which we try to do as often as possible to put them back in the same area that they came for, which is an ecologically sound thing to do.
So how long have you had them?
We've had them, well, all these are different cases, but we've probably had them for kind of 2 to 3 weeks. Maybe one of them kind of up to 4 weeks.
Excellent. Excellent. So this looks like a good spot?
Yeah, we'll release 2 here and 2 just at the other spot that we saw that looked really great.
Okay, sounds good.
So,
I've never done this again before with hawks, so.
well, I think they're gonna take to the sky like pros.
Well, I'm sure they will.
So you can see if you can see him. He's turned around, but can you see him? There you go.
So you've done an awful lot of releases. Does it ever grow old for you?
No, I think that that's the reward for doing wildlife rehab work. And while I don't do any of the animal care, that's why I work there, is because I care about animal welfare, and because that feeling you get when you see an animal who's wild and it's supposed to be wild and something hurt it, like these Swainson's hawks were hurt by things that humans made. Like, they weren't hurt by being attacked by another animal, they were hurt by running into a window. So that we can mitigate that damage and then put them back out where they belong, that's why I work here.
So a couple of years ago, we got a phone call from a member of the public who had found a baby porcupine and was trying to raise it in their home. And she just wasn't doing very well. So we prompted that person to bring the porcupine in, and here's Quilomena with us now. So we happily accepted Quilomena as a patient here, but we soon discovered that she had some major developmental delays due to being fed an inappropriate diet while in captivity with a member of the public. So she was showing some signs of illness that we had to address before she could be released. Well, we feel a mistake was made in trying to keep Quilomena as a pet because they have some very specific diet and enclosure requirements that members of the public just can't meet. So even though the intentions were good to try and save her and try and take care of her, it's just not something that we could recommend members of the public try and undertake. The price that Quilomena has possibly paid is a future of freedom for her living a normal wild life out in the wilds of Calgary. We decided to keep Quilomena here at Calgary Wildlife because not only has she not grown to an optimal size for her species, she also has an inability to produce quills normally, which means that if we release her out into the wild, she's essentially defenseless. Well, and these developmental disorders are most likely caused by missing some real milestones in her growth as a young animal. So we've come to the conclusion that she cannot be released because of the poor diet she was fed in captivity before coming to us. Regardless, we are thrilled that she's here with us, and we're thrilled that we're able to take care of her and that she can thrive here in this environment.
Hi. Hi, you're very pretty.
And because she's a permanent resident,
the message we want everyone to take away from Quillamina's case is that wildlife belong in the wild. And if they cannot be in the wild for some reason, please reach out to us and ask an expert who knows about how to properly care for these animals. These kind of animals are very different from your dogs and your cats, and they have very specific needs. And we are the kind of place that knows exactly what she needs and can help her develop normally.
and they need to constantly be chewing. Like their teeth grow their whole life, so they need to be chewing. And porcupines obviously eat a lot of like.
We're hoping to get her this year into our education program so she can serve as a wild ambassador for our organization, which will hopefully communicate the same things we've talked about here today, is that the wild animals belong in the wild, and this is why. So even though we wish she was out in the wild living a wild life, we're glad that she can help us communicate our mandate to the public. But I personally love caring for her. It's really nice to have mammals here at the center. They're so much like us. They're very much like humans. We deal with a lot of birds here. I really enjoy her company. She's a really very pleasant animal. I enjoy training her. She just really makes all of the staff happy here.
Wintertime, we usually have about 6 staff members. Most of them are working part-time in the winter. And of course, our staffing needs vary seasonally depending on animal activity. So spring and summer are our busiest time. We get quite a lot of orphaned animals during that time. So our numbers fluctuate seasonally, and we get quite a number of animals in spring and summer. So in the winter, we usually have about 6 staff members. None of them really are pulling full-time hours. In the summer, we have up to 12 staff members, and most people are doing full-time hours during that time. We do have 5 summer students that we have come in every year. This is part of a program called Canada Summer Jobs that helps to get students to get experience in their field of study.
My name is Elizabeth, and I'm a summer staff here at Calgary Wildlife. I came to Calgary Wildlife, I want to say about 5 years ago. I was a volunteer. I was here for a couple of summers, and then I decided to apply for the summer student position, and that was when I was just finishing up my master's in primatology here at the U of C. And so I did a summer here, and I enjoyed it so much I decided I wanted to come back again. And so when I had gotten into the veterinary medicine degree here at the U of C, I was able to apply again for another summer student position. And so now I'm back here for this summer in 2016, and it's been a blast. I love watching animals grow up and the success stories that we have, and being able to watch them finally get released back out into the wild. It's always really rewarding. I was looking for places to volunteer, and Calgary Wildlife was really open to accepting new volunteers, and I looked at a bunch of different places that worked with animals, veterinary clinics, rescue organizations, but Calgary Wildlife really opened up their doors, and they trained me up, and they taught me so many different things, and I loved the warm welcome that they gave me, so I stuck on as a volunteer and then eventually became summer staff, which was really fun. My heart always glows when we get little baby animals in, squirrels, birds, and I love taking care of them, and that's for me the most rewarding part about being a summer staff here, is being able to take care of animals, even when I have to take them home with me to feed them overnight. Sometimes we get really small little baby squirrels in and they need to get fed every 2 hours, and that can be hard, but at the end of the day, it's just what we really love to do, and so even those hard parts make it worth it.
Well, I love this organization because it really gives me an opportunity to feel as though I'm making a difference one animal at a time. I've worked with animals my whole life, but this place in particular, I can follow a case from a juvenile or an injured animal right through its care until release, and that is an extremely significant thing. And I don't think there's a lot of people who can say in their careers that they follow a project from conception to finish. It's really rewarding as an individual, and it's rewarding for the other staff member here as well. And I think it's rewarding for the public who bring in animals to us and they're terrified that something bad has happened to these animals, that they're injured, there's no one there who can help them. And then we can tell them that things were successful and that animal was released and that they really made a difference.
So today is kind of a joyous day. The owlets have exceeded expectations and are being released now here in late June, rather than what was projected as the fall. So it's kind of a victory because 2 lives have been put back into their natural habitat, or will be. And yeah, it just goes to prove through the hard work of determined volunteers that all life is precious. Thank you.
All right, are we ready? Let's go.
I know.
They keep escaping on me and gotta put them back in.
Yeah, the flickers. More fawns, but they're kind of sick, so this way.
Our little ones we met.
They're doing okay. They obviously had to be moved away from the big ones.
So why are we releasing the owlets early?
Well, they've reached their goal weight. They're old enough to be self-sufficient, and they've done exceedingly well, so we feel very confident being able to put them back out into the wild. And of course, it's really important for wild animals to go back out as soon as possible so that they have the best chance of actually surviving, because the longer they are in captivity, their chances of survival actually kind of go down because they can develop stress-related conditions by being around humans so much.
This one's ready to go. I can feel him, he's restless inside here.
Yeah, that's a good sign. We consider that a really good sign when they're kind of feisty and ready to, little fighters really. So
Good.
we feel really confident. They've been flying back and forth in their flight pens. They've been in there for a couple of weeks, just flying back and forth and strengthening those wings and their flight muscles. So we're really looking forward to see them take off today.
Good. So being an owl release virgin, what's the procedure today?
Basically, we're just going to put their kennels on the ground and open them and let them come out in their own time. We find that that's sort of the best way and the least stressful way for them to sort of release themselves from their little kennels that we have here. Hopefully they'll do well. Occasionally we have an animal that takes a little bit of time to get used to this new habitat. It's almost kind of surprising and shocking for them, but hopefully that they'll just take right to the sky.
Good, well this should be fun.
I think so too.
So I understand this was your first owl release as well, Victoria?
Yeah.
Was it good for you?
Yeah, this was actually really cool. I've been working at the center for a little while now, almost a month, and it was really nice to see kind of the fruits of labor and actually have like this nice reward of seeing them fly free.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, I'm glad they seemed to just take off really well. One was a little bit in his carrier. I think it felt a little bit safe and was a little bit unsure about what is this new strange place. But once he went, it was amazing to see him flying, both of them. To see them flying is always the best part of our job because, like you said, that's the reward. At the end of the day, there's a lot of hard stuff that's going on sometimes at our center. At the end of the day, this is why we all work there, and this is why you volunteer here, and this is why our donors donate money to us. This is why we're all here. So.
As human beings, we tend to ravage the habitats of wildlife. There are many who are abusive to animals, and there are those who don't understand the importance that each species of animal plays in the maintenance of the ecosystem. Someone needs to be their advocate, their voice. My personal belief is that all life is sacred and worthwhile. That is why I try to do my part as a member of the planet's dominant species to protect the other life forms that surround us. It's the human thing to do, and is indeed our responsibility.